Hello everyone, welcome to an awesome Tuesday. I'm Richard Carlton, creator of fmtraining.tv. Welcome to all the awesome people out there who are watching the broadcast from Discord, from Twitch, from YouTube. We are broadcasting in 1080 high definition, and we're here to answer questions and make your lives as awesome as possible. How do we do that? By teaching you things in the FileMaker platform that help you make better applications, things that will help you make your customers happier, maybe your own teams happier, improve efficiency, save time, save money, all the things that go along with improved business operations. Whether it's business or nonprofit education, doesn't really matter. There's always someone trying to save time and money. And so we're going to keep it on the basic side. And if we wander down the road of making it too complex, I'll try to reel it in. We're going to do this for a couple days. Partly because I used to do this and I'd kind of gotten out of the habit and I'd forgotten. So what I want to do is, before we get too involved, what I want to do is today's broadcast ideally is going to be targeted towards the what I would consider the I'm trying to like make this screen. How do I do that? Oh, I have to do mine. There we go. There's a button. Shrink it down one notch. We want to make sure that we're answering questions for the beginning developers out there. Some of you have less skill than maybe some other people that are there. Don't worry about that. Please ask your questions. Definitely ask your questions. It's very, very, very helpful so I know where you're stuck. And this is part of the conversation that we're putting in the video and in the book. And when you're a brand new developer, you really don't care about performance. All you care is that you pressed a button and something happened and it worked the way you wanted it to work. The value, the number, the mathematical calculation, whatever you did worked. When you press the print button, it actually goes the right layout, sorts the records correctly or whatever it does, prints it and comes back. So basic stuff like that. As you get to be a more advanced developer, people start saying, hey, can you build this for me? And can we share it with our team? And that's where the conversation about performance comes in, because you can share it with 4 or 5, 10 people, but then suddenly it might run really slowly. There's some sort of cliff that you step off of where things start to run slowly because you haven't thought about performance. So it's really kind of the conversation. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to kind of minimize myself out of the way just momentarily. You are looking at 2 computer screens here. I'm remoted into 2 computers. These are on fairly low-powered Mac computers. They're Mac Minis of some flavor. It doesn't really particularly matter. They all have I always make sure I have 16 gigs of RAM on them, and solid-state drives that are at high speed. This is running our test server. We have databases on here. I've logged in here a couple times, and there's all these files in here. This one right here is several, I want to say 4 or 5 gigabytes of data. I can't remember how big it is exactly, but it's a pretty beefy database. There's well over almost 2 million records in here. Anyway, and this is the performance, the processors that are actually operating. So the more I do over here, like if I suddenly run a backup, you'll see it really kick up. Now there really are 2 processors, each with 2 cores. So basically it's kind of like 4 processors. And so the idea is that if I close this, it will, and I probably quit Safari, this will all calm down quite a bit. And the only output will be just general computer operation. And specifically, I am remoted in, so it's pushing the data to me. So the processing you see here is little bits of screen sharing that are going on, okay? Now, this computer so this is our server. This computer over here is our client. It's almost an identical configuration. In fact, I think it is identical configuration of computer. So they are i7 level computers, I believe, yeah. 2 cores on this one, once again, and you see FileMaker, so this is just like the low roar. So this is the combination of us running this activity monitoring software and also screen sharing into it. Here I'm using TeamViewer, here I'm using basically VNC, which is kind of this open source kind of stuff. So the idea is that I just logged in here with this file before. This file has never been opened over here. And the idea is to do things in FileMaker and watch to see what happens. And what's going on is this is the processing on the computer on the client side. This is processing obviously on the server side. Some things we do will cause this to run. Some things will cause this to heavily run. Some things will share it between the 2. And this is also the network traffic. Now this chart is always auto-adjusting. So you have to take a look at the scale to see what it is. It's not moving very much data. Once again, this is the data here, this red data out is me getting the screen share information, right? So this is something that if you're a serious developer and you're trying to address performance issues, there's a couple different ways of doing it. This is the kind of the basically almost free way of doing it, where you basically, you could actually be more or less on 2 computers, but I'm using 3 here because in this case I'm trying to show you, I'm trying not to affect the results too much, but you could be on the client machine watching your client and then also watching the server, and then you do certain things and you see what happens. So understand that there's really 3 big pieces of performance. Once again, I cover this in my training. There are 3 important things about performance. One is that you can do things to cause bits of data to start moving from the server to the client, okay? And obviously it would make sense that by even logging into the file, you're going to cause bits of data to move, okay? And we can talk about that. Moving the bits of data can be expensive. When I say expensive, I mean in terms of time delay. And so moving a couple little bits, it's like, it was an analogy that was done at DEF CON 8 years ago now. And I can't remember if it was Dennis Marshall or it was Mark Richmond from Skeleton Key. And he did it where he had a jar of pennies. And so every time you move a little bit of data, it's like throwing a penny into this big jar. But the problem is if you have a jar of pennies, if you have to move a whole bunch of pennies, it gets heavy. Moving 1 or 2 pennies is fine. Having 20 people move 1 or 2 pennies would seem fine, but then suddenly that server is having to move a big jar of stuff. So it has a cumulative negative effect. So that is moving bits of data, idea 1. The short version is that there's the moving the data. Then FileMaker does this thing where it caches the data for you. So it actually saves the data on the client. So as the bits of data come down, the pennies come down, the FileMaker client generally saves the pennies. It didn't used to save the pennies hardly at all. And then it started to save them more and more, starting with FileMaker 12. And then with FileMaker 15, it started downloading and keeping the schema pennies. The pennies, there's really 2 kinds of pennies that come down. There's pennies that have to do with the schema of the file. If I clone the FileMaker file and give you the FileMaker file, a clone of it, all that is schema. It's 100% schema. It's tables, it's table field definitions, it's layout objects, scripts, custom functions. There's no user data. There's no globals, there's no user data, nothing. That is total schema. So if I say schema comes down and it's cached and saved, starting in FileMaker 15, it started to save that. What it means is that as you open a FileMaker file the first time and you go to a layout for the first time and say, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click, and then what's going to happen is that right now, I think I done, there I go. It's going to actually go to that layout. In order to get the layout, it's going to have to download all these objects, save that information, and download this record and 25 other records that are right next to it, okay? So there was a little bit of a burp here, a little bit here. You didn't really see much going on there, and you see that spike. That spike is downloading the 25 records and any incidental layout information. It's why you make the layouts and things as light as possible. So you have moving the bits of data, you have the cache, whereas FileMaker's trying to help you because if you move the pennies down and you keep the pennies, then if you need the pennies again, you just reuse them locally, right? You don't go back and re-download the pennies. It's not like you bring the pennies down, use them, and then you light them on fire and burn them, which is not a great analogy. It's hard to burn metal, but you get the idea. If you spent them and they were gone and you had to bring them down again. With FileMaker 8, starting with 8, I don't know where they changed this, but even with 18 and 19, even the data is really well preserved. So you have the schema data that comes down, the pennies. Then you have the pennies that manage the data here, the record data. And normally you would assume that this data, if you quit FileMaker, and I'm going to go ahead and just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and close it, close this out. I'm going to actually quit FileMaker right now. And so there's a little bit of overhead that'll go on here as it quits the application. I'm going to come back down here. I'm going to reopen it. And what I want to do is now it opens the app. There's a little bit of processing that goes on right here. I'm going to let it steady down for a second, kind of get to that low roar. Okay, so it's back down to where it was. I'm going to select on this. I'm going to double click. And what I want to do is I'm going to watch over here from the server. Okay, And what did that tell us? If you come down here, there was a little bit of a spike. It dumped some data, okay? And so what did it dump? What did it move? I would be very curious. That's data in, right? So that's data coming in. Little bits of data out, tiny. Let me do it again. That's just interesting. And once again, the goal with this is to kind of learn and take things apart and understand what they're doing. So theoretically, the schema has already been cached and saved. It's hidden on this client computer. I would be shocked if it did very much. I could see it. Like the client has to tell you who it is. So the client's going to give you its information. It's going to actually send you the data it has, and then the server's going to send back the data that needs to be changed or updated. So this little bit of data is it coming up to speed with what is cached. So it's comparing the pennies on the server up here at the top with the pennies down at the bottom. So if I make myself a little taller here, I can do that so I can wave my hands around. But the pennies at the top versus the pennies, the server down here is doing a comparison to make sure the pennies match. That makes sense? Now, it hasn't downloaded everything, but so far the client has only gone to the home screen and run the startup script. So let me go ahead and do that one more time. I'm going to watch over here. It's pretty quiet. That was that process there. I'm going to open it up again. And so you'll see a little bit of the application spinning up. Okay, and it had nothing to do with starting point or our database. This is just FileMaker, the app spinning. And then what ends up happening is we take a look at, we're going to open it one more time. We're going to watch here, watch here. So this is the data in and out of the server. And then this is the local machine. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to double click it, put my hands in the air, wait. So a little bit of a spike once again, and the spikes kind of vary depending upon, there's a little bit of a spike, but that's the data in. That is the client saying, this is the pennies I have. Here's a list of all the pennies I have. And very little coming out of the server because the server confirmed that none of the pennies had changed, right? The layouts haven't changed, etc. So pretty interesting, right? So the idea is as we compare these things, is we keep an eye on what's going on. When I come over here to the contacts database right here, once again, it's going to pull the pennies up of the schema of the layout objects it's already saved. It pulls up the first 25 records, which it already had. And then if I jump, say, forward a little bit, I start nudging forward just a smidge. I'm going to move this down here. Move it. There we go. I'm going to nudge this down just a little bit. I'm going to start flipping records here, and you start to watch what's going on, right? Now, what it's downloading right now, little bits of stuff, is that it has to download the related records here. The reason it's downloading these related records is that Nick in the design tells you that there's 25 contact records in there. For it to even tell us that there's 25 in there, it had to download those 25 records. It's not selective. When it downloads a record for you, it downloads the entire record, all the fields. If you need one field, it doesn't matter. It's going to give you all the fields except for containers. Containers are separate and only when displayed on screen. If you have questions, make sure you ask me the question. And so once again, the scale over here kind of adjusts a little bit. That's why I have to kind of keep it. I keep putting it off, but the scale keeps adjusting. So that's 640 mega kilobits a second. Once again, it's not so much the amount of data. It's just the seeing where spikes occur and what caused them to occur. So as I flip through records here, it went and it just sent me another 25 records of data. Right here was what that was. It, for whatever reason, triggered a data download of additional records. And you say, well, how do you know when you're looking at records that are cached or not cached? It's not hard to do. If you come over here briefly and look, what you can do is as I scroll down here, it's kind of, your screen is set a little bit slow speed. It's pretty smooth right now. And what happens is that FileMaker is going to send us the 25 records down from the server, or 25 normally, but on a list view, it's going to send you the ones that it needs to display on the layout. So in this case, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's about 20 records. And so as you come down here, notice I'm going pretty slow. It's pretty smooth, right? Because I think it downloaded the first 50 or so. And I could click, but then if I really start, I'm starting to scroll. I'm starting to pull really hard, pulling really hard, pulling really hard. And I'm going to come over here. I'm going to move it over here. I'm going to pull really hard. And what will happen is if I actually grab this right here and I start to move it, there's this chunking behavior that occurs. It's literally chunking. There's a little, almost little pauses in it. And what you can see over here is FileMaker is sending me the necessary data so I can display those records. The interesting part now is that now these records are now in the cache. So if I go backwards, what ends up happening, it's chunking a little bit there. But what happens is that you're using the data that's already been saved, if that makes sense. So the data has been saved here. So once again, this idea that FileMaker is going to send the data down to you, and your client on Pro or Go is going to save the data locally and recycle it, and then only get new data if somehow it's changed. If it doesn't have the data it needs, it'll start the pennies moving down, and that's where so that's where you have to be thoughtful about what you're doing. So if I go over here to, for example, this person here, and we do a search for everyone with an M, I'm going to come back over here. What I want to do is I want things to kind of stabilize out for a second and kind of slow down, stabilize out. All right, so let me do a search for the letter M. I'm gonna hit the return key. Comes back really fast. No perceivable burp over here with this at all. There's almost no perceivable burp. Not much happened right here, okay? And so that is an index field, right? Index field. So if I need to do a search on an unindexed field, say for example, say I go to invoice. Now when I go to invoices here, it's probably going to cause a little bit of a data load to occur. A little bit more processing here. Come back over here. Here comes the layout objects and the first set of data that I need for the invoice. Thanks so much on it. That's really downloading a lot of data right there. So what did I do to cause that to happen? I would be really interested to know. And they're still going. Now notice the processor on the server isn't doing anything. It's just reading the data off the hard drive and kicking it over the side of the ship, right? Kicking it over the side. So but it's sending the data, so the network card there is pushing out quite a bit of data. FileMaker is running wild, and I'm really wondering what it's doing, because I said to jump to the invoices screen, and it is downloading. We were making a little change to this file for fun and games. It is downloading a ton of data. I'm wondering if it's doing a some sort of sort or something over there on the other side. I'd be really curious to know what this is. This is not going according to script. I'm having an in-flight malfunction, right? So, okay, somehow I ended up in the Latin long on maps. Okay, that's not, I don't think I pressed that. Let me try the invoice. Okay, that was what was supposed to happen the first time. So somehow I hit the charts or maps button or something like that, which caused all this to happen. That is what it's supposed to do when you go to the invoices. It loads it, it brings the data down. That's all there is to it. Yeah, I must have not seen where my mouse hit. So if I'm over here on this screen, there is some data that are what we call unstored calculations. So as I flip through records, once again, it's going to download these records. And we're going to see little spikes of data coming back and forth. The server's not doing too much. If I do a search for, let's just do a search in here for DA Dawn, right? It's doing an index search. Technically what happens, the client here does the search, or knows that we're doing a search, hands it to the server does it, but it's an index field and it's so fast you never see anything happening here. And then as we get this found set of records, it's going to bring down the first 25 of this found set. So it didn't download 3,981. It gave me the first 20. You can't see it, but the first 25 are in memory. So if I scroll past 25, it will go and get another batch. Now what it didn't do, it didn't download all the related data. So as I flip through here, it's having to find this related data here and bring it to me, okay? So you'll see this little traffic down here. I don't know if you can see that, the little burps, it's bringing down the related text data. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Let's say we do a search on a field that is calculated. This field right here, I know, is a calculated, let me see, days to pay. So that should be a field that I can enter. And I'm pretty sure if I come over here, I should be able to enter in browse mode. It's almost like someone, yeah, save changes automatically. That'd be really great. What I want to do is I want to see the calculation of this field here, right? What I want to do is I want to make sure this is going to be an days to pay. let's just change this to elapsed days. Okay. So you have the invoice days, and then you have this, the days to pay. So I'm going to go into field definitions real quick. I'm going to find days to pay. We are sorted here by name. I'm going to go days to pay. Days to pay. I can zoom in a little bit for those of you who can't see this. I can say days to pay, and I've already set this. So I did this already pre-work. I'm taking the current date, or I'm doing a comparison between the current date and the invoice date. If you do math on two dates, like add them or move them, or add one or take one away from the other, you're going to get integers, and those integers will be days. And so that's what we're going to do. So this is basically, I could rename this if I wanted to. I'm not going to make a change here, but it's basically the elapsed days of the invoice. So I go back to browse mode on this. This is actually showing us the elapsed days from this invoice right here. So if I zoom back out, this is where it gets real interesting when you want to learn about the FileMaker platform, is that you do a search right here, and we say, show me something that's greater than 30 days. Now, this is an unindexed search. The values aren't stored, so the system has to calculate the values and do the find. Now, the question is, for those of you paying attention, anyone paying attention, it's been like beyond quiet, where will this command be executed? It's we already said an index search will be performed on the server if possible. Most of the time it gets on the server sends back the response, the proper response. The client doesn't do the work. You really don't want the client doing all the work, because if the client has to do the work, you have to send all the pennies down before it can do the work, right? And so it'd be better if we just sent the request up to the server did the work, just sent us back the response, that the values we needed. So that was an index find. This is an unindexed find. Do any of you have a vote which way it will go? Will it go to the server, or will it go to the client? Which way? So what you're going to do is you're going to watch these machines. So I hit return, and instantly we have a spike on the server. The server is processing the request for us. The client is still sitting here, kind of doing a progress bar, spinning beach ball, whatever. The server is doing the work. Notice we come over here to data. That's almost no data being sent. It's not sending anything yet. It's struggling here to go through the database to evaluate, to get the answer, right? And so once it's done evaluating it, it will then shoot it back to us, and we will see it over here. There's a little bit there. That was probably me moving the screen around or doing something. A little bit of data moving there, but you can tell it's still working on it. 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 Right? Because I have almost 1 million records in here. Right? So it's great that this isn't happening locally. It's not so great. Now it's done. Now it came back, but see that? So there you go. The client almost didn't do anything. It was like the laziest client I've ever seen. And so that's an unindexed search. So goes to the server too. An index search goes to the server. When does it not go to the server? If that calculation, you want to try this? We could do this. Are you guys paying attention? Because if you're not, I'm not gonna go for the the long ball, grand slam. Okay, people are paying attention. Okay, good. All right, because I don't want to. I'm taking a risk here by changing the field definition on live TV, because bad things can happen. So what I would do is I would say the build to, pay to. What we're going to do is now notice that the get current date. Okay, you can't see the calculation. Here's the calculation. So this is pretty sort of, the client sent this to the server and said, go get me these records that match this, that did certain thing. But this was the calculation it had to evaluate. What if we say, if get, that's a good question. It should be something pretty innocuous, like get plat. Yeah, it's a little bit aggravated. Is it get? Is it platform? Get current platform. Get, let me see, plat. Get system platform. All right, let's try that. So I'm going to put get system platform here. Now the system platform is something that is specific to my client. And I think it's if it's a 1, it's a 2, it's a 2, it's a 1. Bring that up. What does it say? System platform. So I'm on a Mac, right? So what is it going to say? So Macs are 1. Okay, so I'm going to say if it's a 1, Yeah, that's interesting. So if it equals a 1, then I want you to do this calculation. Else, else I'm just going to put like a 0 or something like that, right? But what's happening is we're asking the server to evaluate the system platform, okay? And if my guess is correct, what'll happen is the server will go, oh, I can't evaluate the platform. Only you know your platform. It throws the request back at the client. So everyone ready to try this one? This should cause it to break. And not really break. It just forces, you're taking another level of efficiency away from the computer. So let me do a find on here. I'm going to say greater than 20. Oop, greater than 20. Greater than 20. Okay. 1, 2, 3, go. Nope, it still sent it to the server. There's a get function. Some of the get functions, maybe it's the screen resolution. Some of the get functions, or they changed it, right? That's the thing with Claris is that they keep changing this and they don't write it down. They don't document it. Any of this stuff is not. That's why you have to do this testing like this. So that didn't trip it, but you can, according to Clay at Claris, you can put a get function that's specific to the client that only the client can evaluate. Maybe get last modifier key or some crappy thing like that. Maybe that would do it. And then the server goes, I can't answer it. Let me just give you all the pennies, and then you evaluate it. Right? Makes sense? Yeah, the server, I think I turned off the backups on the server on this one just because I don't want it to throw my performance chart off at when it runs backups. So I just finished again. One more time. Let's just do, it would be a get. So funny when you're kind of experimenting with stuff because there's so much in the platform to do. Let's just say we say get last. Is it modifier key mod? Okay, that's definitely a modifier key thing right there. So there's get. Let's put that one in there. Get active modifier keys is greater than 0 or something, right? That will cause it to, that will cause it to probably do this, have the client do it. Because otherwise, for the server to evaluate it, the client would have had to send the server the modifier keys, right? Which I think would be really unlikely that would do that. If this is and say, hey, what'd you guys do? Because every year Claris does this, they modify the product a little bit, make it a little bit better. It used to be, this is a really good one, it used to be that when you quit FileMaker Pro, you starting with 15, you would keep the structural data, the schema data, the cache, but the user data entry data would be jettisoned. It doesn't do that anymore. It keeps the user data for a while. I sent Clay an official request asking for a clarification on how long it keeps it. If you quit it, reopen it, you'll see this in a little bit. It's pretty interesting. So we're going to try this again. I'm going to try it right here. So we're all ready. We got kind of like a standard low roar going on here in the processes. I'm going to try this again. I'm going to say greater than 0. I'm just going to, for fun, hold down. Oof. Can I hold down the option key and hit return? Command key and hit return. There it goes. Yeah. Okay, so check it out. That did it. So there are get functions that do this, okay? Get the system platform, I guess it knew that, but check it out. Totally different scenario. The server, now check it out. The server's going, okay, I can't really talk creatively too long. The server's going, shit, I can't answer the question. Okay, take all the pennies out of the jar. Take all the pennies out of the jar. Pour them through the internet. And then the client does the analysis and it comes back with the data, right? There you go. Pretty interesting, eh? So if the server can't answer the question, it just punts. It's like if you're doing like a presidential debate. Hi, I'm Richard. I'm running for office. Vote for me. I'll make your database great. Right? Whatever. And so someone asks you a question. You're like, that question's really hard. Where's Slovakia and what's the per capita gross domestic income of the people there? I'm just going to pass on that. Give it to the other guy. He can answer the question, right? That's what server does. It punts over the fence. Punts, sends you the data, says, good luck, have a nice life. That is good stuff. How about making the change directly on the server? Yeah, listen, Michael. So right now, the database is on the FileMaker server. It's this is a server over here. It's on this server. I'm actually logged on to over here. That's how I do all my development, because it's by far the best way of doing development, in my opinion. You don't have to worry about deploy, but I'm only working on like a master file or my one customer's file. If you have individual customers and you're doing customization for them, it's going to be hard to justify deploy. It just is. Deploy that's a 360 product, right? Everyone, we talked about that. Fantastic product. Jesse's awesome. Oh yeah, Jesse owes me $10,000 for the endorsement. Thank you, Jesse. But the short version of that is that deploy costs money. It's not necessarily cheap. But if you built a vertical market application, like Ken made the ballooning for everyone, Ballooning Pro 1.0, we talked about that yesterday, and he had 150, 80, 20 customers. He made an update, and he wanted everyone to get that update. The deploy software from 360 works. You press a button, it would talk to all the servers of your customers, and it would push out the updates. Really quite good. That would be nice. But I actually do, for all my stuff, I just do make the changes live on the server. Now, here's the problem. If you're working on, so I'm on the layout. Say I'm on a different record. Doesn't matter what record I'm on. Okay. And then I go over here and I start making an edit to the layout. Right? I'm like, I don't know, the charting button needs to be over here or something like that. When I go back to browse mode, it's going to cause this person to re-download a bunch of data and refresh, because the server knows that their stuff is out of date. And so when you go, of course, go back to browse mode on this side, you see it over here. You'll see a flashy thing. I'm going to go to browse mode. I'm going to come back over here, and you'll see this. Now, whether you see the flash or not, it should happen. Or am I not on the wrong? All my invoices, I screwed that up. Let me try that again. Sorry. My bad. I'm a retard. Let me grab that, move that around, and then I go back to browse mode, and you'll get this. See, it didn't flash quite so bad, but this thing historically flashes. Other things that people will do is that if you're on a layout and you go manage the layouts. This is a window I've most of the time almost forgot existed. It's a way of actually seeing all the layouts. And so say I'm on layout L800C over here, and I come over here and say I grab L800C and I move it, right? And then I close it. Okay, it didn't do anything that time. You've got to watch out for this, because you can cause this thing to completely redraw and reflash, and you can cause people stuff to be shifting around and reflashing. And when it reflashes, they're getting a re-download from the server. Once again, you've taken some of their pennies, you've invalidated the pennies. It's like, no, that's a North Korean counterfeit penny. Throw those away. Here's new pennies. And so, which would be kind of cool. I'd love a counterfeit penny from North Korea. It would be a collector's item. But that being said, this is that you need to be cognizant when you're doing development. You don't cause people to explode and have unnecessary redraws and stuff like that. So that's a concern. Tests should always be done. The best practice to let others do the test, because other people always come up ways. Yeah, so let's talk about, we can talk about that briefly, and then do you change? Yeah, Ken is completely obsessed about dev servers and stuff. I'm not sure why Ken is obsessed about dev servers. I guess someone said it's important or it's useful, and then therefore I must have it. I think here's the rub with this. This all gets back to how big of a company do you have, and do your people listen to you when you talk? Okay, and I'm going to be very. Let's talk about this. If I say to my staff, we have a system, you saw a pop-up a second ago, finished goods. It keeps track of how many downloads a starting point and people buying bundles and stuff like that. And I say, let's make a change to the system. I have a company, we have 30 people. Just make the change, right? Because I'm capable of dealing with a bug or a problem. If there's a problem, there are FileMaker people who can engage and help. If I say, John Hogle, go make a change, like we have that new enterprise version of starting point, go make a change, but then he makes it to like a development version. Then someone has to go and QA the development version, right? And then after they QA the development version, assuming they listen to you QA it and do the QA and they report it back to you, it has to go back to the guy who originally did it. And then that guy has to decide if it passed the QA. And if it passed the QA, then he has to press the button to push it into production, which is what the deploy software does, makes it fairly easy to do that. But you have to have a process in your organization where you're going to give it to Hogle, and Hogle's going to do it. And then Hogle gives it to these people over here, and they're going to actually pay attention to you and not ignore you. They're going to actually test it, because obviously they have time in the day to test the software you gave them, right? Because everyone has extra hours. They're just sitting around watching Facebook and YouTube and stuff, right? The problem is you go into an organization where they're pretty damn busy, and you tell them to test something, they're not going to hardly read your email, much less test anything. We've run into organizations that completely failed on a rollout because they refused to test the software was made live. And it's gotten to the point where if the customers don't do the test and tell us they've tested it and actually made a legitimate effort, the project stops. We won't roll it out for them. We just say, hey, either you can pay us, keep going, or we can just stop and walk away because you won't test it. But rolling it out would be bad because you haven't tested it, right? So it becomes a kind of a big issue. So what TK was talking about this, but what I do is when I'm in FileMaker and I'm afraid I'm going to break something, I always work on a duplicated layout. I work on a duplicate of the script. I work on duplicates in the same file, because then when you like it and you like what it's doing, then you just move it. You move it to the correct layout or whatever you do. If you're doing like massive schema changing and rewiring the anchor buoys and whatever else, then that's a little trickier to do. Obviously, that's where maybe you need an offline. It's situation dependent, it really is. TK, I mean, you have comment on that, but it's listen. A development server and a development process is fine as long as you have a way of getting people to respond and getting it to roll it forward. Okay. So the deploy software helps you with that. Technically, it's a data migration tool from FileMaker. It's a command line tool. But the deploy software from 360works actually takes the file at your local developer development. I think it clones it. It makes a clone. Then it uploads the clone to those servers, to the server. It shuts down the live file. It moves the data using the data migration tool that it kind of moves it up there. It moves the data from their old file to the new clone that it created for you. Then it turns it back on the server and makes it live. It's really freaking cool. It's just not free, and it's something that will only get better as time goes forward. At some point in the future, and of course, I think realistically this could be 10 years, this will be built into the platform and it'll have this ability. The speed clearance is innovating, and I'm not knocking on them. They have a certain speed. They're trying to do a lot. There's a new management team there that's trying to figure out kind of the entire plan. And so I always assume that stuff will come out sooner than it does. Right now they're shipping stuff sooner, but it's buggier because it's an early release thing, which is fine. It's just it means that when something comes out and you see it, doesn't mean like some of you were saying, Richard, where is the documentation and the training on how to do add-on modules? If that's a beta feature, I'm not going to provide official training on it until they solidify it, right? So there's this, even some of you are trying to get through that process of, if it's a beta feature, do I want to use it? And just because it's in the product, just because the button is there, do you want to push the button? Because, it might blow everything up. So yeah, Michael, I mean, we kind of wandered all into this, but we're back to kind of the deployment and development conversation. Like if you're scared to death of doing the development, I mean, because in the old days, there was no way to easily move the data from file 1 to file 2. If you make a bunch of changes in here, and you're in here in layout mode, and you're moving this item, you're like doing like the Nick design shit. You're gonna like 1 pixel that way, and I'm gonna move this 1 pixel this way, and I'm gonna move this 2 pixels this way, and I'm gonna change all this. Every time I do that, prior to FileMaker 17, you had to take all those changes and then go to the other file and do them all over again. There was no way to easily move the data. So starting with 17, they have the data migration tool. You have an old file, the new file. It's this command line thing, and it moves it from point A to point B. All of you have my training it's in there. We spent like 3 or 4 videos going through it. It's awesome. It's probably one of the most important features that in a long time. That feature was important, and the next important feature was the JavaScript innovation back and forth between the web viewer without going to URL protocol in 19. That was another big deal. So the data migration tool keeps you from having to re-import all the data, because if you want to move, like the old way of doing this, like I say, oh, I want to import all the data out of one set of tables here in this copy of starting point, which is not even that sophisticated, to another copy of starting point. It's like 30 tables, whatever it is. So you got to do the export and the import 30 times. Days of work. The data migration tool is smart. It sees what you're doing. It does it literally, and something that would take days to do becomes about 90 seconds. And so Jesse Barnum took that command line tool, wrapped up some other stuff in it to like move the files for you to the various servers. So if you have a vertical market application, you're making Balloon Pro 2.0, a Balloon Pro 2.0, then we can go down that road and do that. So, all right, cool. See you tomorrow, folks. I'm going to run the closing credits. If you have questions, send me an email. Shoot me. Let me know what sessions you would like to see so we can book it. Awesome.
Guys just stepped up the whole way. Calm, cool, collected the quarterback. Great read, good patience. More importantly, great job up front protecting this quarterback to give you a chance. And that's all you can ask for.
Trying to rally down 10. 9:25 to go here in the fourth. Short motion by Amendola from the left. Brady takes the shotgun snap. Stands in, throws it left for Amendola. Reaches up and snacks a high throw and lands inside the 10. Rolling to the 9. Ball slightly behind him, but Danny makes the grab.